What is going on, everyone? Today is March 27th, 2024. Today I am joined with
Eric Wilson.
you're tuned into the Invested in Hockey podcast and changing it up a little bit. We're going to do a podcast at night after the night slate. I know there's a couple games going on right now. We watched actually a good amount of games. I mean, I felt like we almost catch all the action today. Watched the Oilers, watched the Leafs, watched the Capitals win that awesome overtime exciting game. That was ridiculous. Even the Edmonton game was crazy. So we were lacking nothing short of great hockey. I don't know what you thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, to have that many overtime games when couple hours before that 7 p.m. slate, I kind of threw in our headlines here. I said, what a slate of hockey, but I think like the actual slate of hockey wouldn't have been the same without those overtime games. So, I mean, some high scoring ones, couple interesting ones. I think we can be honest with ourselves, Sans, but we didn't really watch any of that Bruins Florida game, which was probably the best game in terms of overall standings. But regardless, you can't watch every game. We definitely watched a lot, and I think even if we have some little fatigue, we'll try and make this episode interesting for all of our viewers. So
No, definitely, I agree with you. I mean, even though we didn't get to watch the full, you know, Bruins game, I felt like we watched like a decent amount at the beginning, so it wasn't like we missed a total amount. Obviously, it's fantasy playoffs, and I was able to make it to the second round, and I put fantasy over my team, and I started Bobrovsky against the Bruins, which was a massive mistake. So, honestly, we'll live with those mistakes, see what tomorrow looks like. But I kind of want to move on to a more positive topic, and it seems like Josh Doan is going to make his NHL debut just a couple hours ago. Sorry, it looks like Josh Doan made his NHL debut a couple hours ago and even scored his first NHL goal, which seeing the video on Twitter, like it was just crazy to see everyone's reaction. Everyone was going nuts. It showed his parents, obviously Shane Doan, a huge member of the Coyotes organization. And I mean, like, what does that feel like for someone like Shane Doan watching your kid not only make his NHL debut, but at home score his first NHL goal? Like, that was ridiculous.
I mean, I don't didn't get to see his reaction yet, but I'd assume that he'd be tearing up a little. That's gonna be emotional. Um, just because I don't think he's probably spent much time in that building. It still probably means just as much, right? Like, obviously there's a lot of discussion going around the Arizona fan base, but nothing will top being in the actual franchise and being Shane Doan, who every Arizona Coyotes fan should know who Shane Doan is, even though he was obviously a member of, call it, Phoenix most of his time before they were Arizona. Same thing regardless. So I think emotional is the word I'd put it. I don't know about you.
I mean, yeah, just surreal probably. And although it's not the biggest arena in the world, Mullet Arena was definitely bumping. You got to check out that video on Twitter. Like everyone was just going crazy when he scored the goal. It wasn't even like the nicest goal either. He kind of like came around the net, puck jumped up, he took like a little whack at it, had a nice celebration, and man, the crowd was going crazy. It just kind of goes to show how awesome hockey is and even how generations can kind of be passed down. And we talked about players playing with their parents, kids playing with their parents, parents playing with their kids, like even coaching them. Like this is a absolutely awesome moment for the NHL, and I'm sure everyone's super happy for him.
Yeah, no, totally. Again, it goes to show that it's not just about making the playoffs. That's no longer relevant for the Coyotes this season. There's bigger things in store for them. So for being able to look at your prospect pool and to identify someone who has more than just a name, more than just a prospect with certain stats, it's pretty awesome. So I am curious if he'll play the rest of the year with them. I mean, you gotta hope so, but it's also something to look forward to because he's obviously a young forward for them, right?
I mean, it's not like you have a lot to lose right now. They're not in a position where, like you mentioned, they're not going for a playoff spot. So, what could you lose? Obviously, there's a little bit of contract implications right now. Like, could he lose a year if he plays? I think it's what, 6 games. So we'll see what that looks like for him. But at the end of the day, it's a great look for the organization, obviously for Shane Doan, and he drafted in the second round, 37th overall. Hopefully, as long as he could keep playing the rest of the year, maybe he could find himself having a good training camp and even on the opening day roster come next October.
100%. Yeah, I think when you look at next October, that scares me a little just because it feels like it's so far away. But obviously, for all the players fighting in lineups, when you're on a team that maybe he's in the basement. You look at Chicago, I think they had a big win today. Like games like that, they might not matter to us, but like there's those little things that go on in the game, and I think it can definitely impact the coach's view, let alone a prospect like whether it's Doan or someone else. So totally agree with you, and I think maybe we can focus on some of the teams that have meaning and have some clinching scenarios that were in place tonight.
I mean, there was a lot of teams and a lot of good games, like we already talked about. Pretty much, if you want to start with that Washington game, I think that like this game that Washington just won in overtime is going to be one of those games that a week and a half, 2 weeks from now, we look back and say, okay, that's where Washington really bridged the gap and was able to grab a wild card spot, beating out Detroit. And it was just dog eat dog watching that game. Overtime was great, and just looking at Charlie Lindgren right now, it's almost like he just came out of nowhere, and out of nowhere, he's playing fantastic hockey. Like they could definitely lean on him, and they're doing just that. So if you're a Washington Capitals fan, you have to be happy. And even looking at Ovechkin's race to Wayne Gretzky, he's getting closer and closer every day.
Yeah, I hate to go back on my words, but like if I talk about Washington in maybe episodes 1 to 10 of our podcast, you'll hear me just talking about how, oh, it's you play around Ovechkin, but like clearly that's not the case when you have Dylan Strome scoring a ton of goals. You have success without Tom Wilson. Like you have a team there and they're getting it done. I'll give respects to them just because they're in a playoff spot, and I'm not gonna wish on any team to like not continue their success, but we'll see what happens, right? Because it is still close, and I think, like you said, that 1 point can make a massive difference when we had a 3-3 game, and eventually one team had to take the win, right?
Yeah, I've always found this position for like NHL teams to be so awkward because especially for Washington, I don't think that they're a team that could be or is built for the playoffs, but obviously they found themselves in that position right now. Is it worth it to kind of when you're looking at the deadline, sorry, would it be worth it to trade and look to make some moves where you can build your roster? I mean, for Washington, no, I don't think that was the right idea, and that's the direction they went in. They were honestly selling at the deadline. Like we saw them trade Kuzi, we saw them trade Mantha. They've lost a lot of players, like we talked about in the last podcast. They lost Backstrom this year too. Like there's been a lot of injuries, a lot of trades, a lot of change, and this team is still surprising everyone. So for me, I'm gonna cheer for Washington. I want them to make the playoffs. I want to see what type of buzz they can make in the playoffs. But if they do miss out, it's gonna suck a little bit. But at least we know that players like Lapierre, McMichael, Dylan Strome, and even I want to call it Ovi too, are kind of on that uptrend heading into next year. Like although Ovi didn't look great at the start of this season, he kind of has something to fall back on come October.
100%. You literally stole my words there with the McMichael Lapierre plus Ovi combination there, and as the Invested in Hockey podcast, we obviously have to highlight what teams and what players you could invest in, but there's a clear future there. And we didn't see that sense of direction from Washington, call it a year ago. We didn't know what prospects would be in the lineup. Wouldn't have been able to tell you that Ivan Miroshenko would have been playing some games for them. Like, you know what I mean? So I think this is huge for the Caps. And definitely great to kind of point that out. You mentioned Kuzi as well and how he moved. One topic I wanted to kind of bring up was the 2023 to 24 all healthy scratch team, which I actually saw Sportsnet do this yesterday. So I'll give credits to them. But um, what other kind of healthy scratches would you put into a all-star team, would you call it?
I mean, off the top of my head, to talk about some players that got healthy scratch, there's three that kind of come to mind. I mean, Patrick Laine, before he kind of took a back seat this season, a player that, all-star caliber when he was drafted and hasn't really panned out. We saw him get healthy scratch, so that was a surprise. A couple days ago, Sean Couturier was even healthy scratch for 2 games back to back, where everyone was asking questions, and it didn't seem like John Tortorella was willing to answer them at all. And then the third player that it's been a rumor, but Evander Kane didn't play the last game. They said it was for maintenance issues, but reports were coming out that it could be a healthy scratch. They didn't want to stir anything up for it. So for me, off the top of my head, those are three players this season.
Honestly, I love that. I love that you mentioned Patrick Laine and especially that Evander Kane situation. That's one of those ones where it's so hard for us to speak on it because we obviously have no clue, but definitely makes you think because I saw Kane tonight and I was able to actually spot him on the ice. He had that breakaway chance. I'm sure you saw that too. So it's like
Yeah.
maybe you just need to motivate a player a little, and it brings up so many other good names. We got Andre Kuzmenko, who has had his ups and downs. Obviously, he got traded. Some other interesting names, like you're saying with Couturier, even Morgan Frost was scratched at some point this year. He's been stepping it up for the Flyers, who, did get a point tonight, which was also big for that divisional race, right? So a lot of good names, mostly names up front, but to kind of bring up that Leafs combo that we always talk about, we have TJ Brody, who's been scratched a little. He played a little better tonight. And then, Mark Giordano, who not as relevant nowadays, but a lot of those iffy guys who are in and out of the lineup, and they really have to make an impact if they want to make the playoffs, right?
Yeah, for sure. And even looking at the list, there's a couple of names that surprised me even being mentioned. Like I know Tony DeAngelo was mentioned here in this list, and I know he was waived at the deadline, but I don't think he was picked up by anyone. Is he still playing with Carolina right now? Because I know he was waived.
I would assume he is. I think he is, and it must be a healthy scratch situation, but Um, because their decor is so loaded, I don't know, and I'm not 100% certain. I would assume though he's played at least 30 plus games for them. I think he's played a good amount, right?
So looking at some quick stats right now, he's played 28 games this season, and it does seem like he did play yesterday against Pittsburgh with Carolina, but on March 7th, himself along with seven other players were placed on waivers. So I remember even looking at that when it was the trade deadline and saying, why can't the Leafs look at a player like Tony DeAngelo, someone that really stirred up the pot,
Yeah.
if you remember in the playoffs just a couple of years ago. So I like how you brought up kind of the 2023 all healthy scratch team. So that's pretty funny to me.
Exactly, man. Hey, we always are talking about the Hart Trophy runners. Let's make a team full of Hart Trophy finalists, call it. But what about the guys who, go through the ups and downs, and they still have some legitimacy to their name, right? So I thought that was important, and kind of leads us to quickly recap the three stars of the week who talk about our prime childhood. I'll let you kind of introduce the three guys who were there.
I mean, obviously there was a couple, good options this week, but the one that really stood out to me was Ovi, and he's been scoring at an unreal pace because when we were looking at it at the beginning of the season, no one thought that he would be in a position. I mean, even just going back on the Capitals topic, I know we tried to wrap it up, but it's so hard to not talk about it because it's been so spectacular for them. Ovi starts off the year, everyone's tweeting about it, talking about it on TV. Is he not going to get the record? Is he going to get it? Is he injured? What's going on? Is he going to sit out? Like a little bit of trade talk. I know we're hearing that with Sidney Crosby right now, but he gets that third star of the week. Or sorry, he leads all three stars of the week. Looked great, played great, scored lots of goals, looked great tonight, and he's kind of setting the tone for a lot of these players in Washington.
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously we see the household names in Matthews, McDavid, who both obviously made an impact for their team tonight. I mean, the Leafs didn't come on out on top, but the Oilers did, and so that was an interesting week because we did mention this, I think, but Washington played that 5 game week. So Ovi did score 7 goals, but in 5 games, you got to say, okay, that's a player's got to be pretty fatigued over 5 games in 7 days, right?
Oh, easily. All that traveling to a player of his age, and for him to just keep on pushing, keep on winning. Like, I mean, it's almost if you're looking at Crosby right now, like you got to be a little bit jealous considering at the start of the season they make a big trade to get Eric Carlson, and now they're looking at a position where, I mean, they're not really close to a playoff spot at all.
Yeah, that's the thing is it's like we're finally hitting that 10 game mark where we can enter the single digits in terms of games remaining, right? And it's like if you got 10 games left, there's only 20 points up for grabs. It's a lot easier to calculate who can make the playoffs, right?
Exactly.
And I think that leads us into the last kind of game we'll discuss for the night since we don't need to go over all of them. But the Predators came back in a game I didn't really watch. I know you got to kind of see the end there, but what happened to Vegas?
I mean, Vegas was up 3-0. Nashville made it 3-1, came all the way back, tied it up 4-4 at the end, overtime. settled it. Nashville takes the win, and UC Saros again with just a massive win. The past 15 games that he's played, he's been unreal. I don't know if it's been a little bit of a spark under his butt because he was in some trade talks at the trade deadline. Obviously, everyone's talking about the U2 concert, but Saros has been unreal, and this Nashville team all around has been great. Forsberg is firing from all angles. Ryan O'Reilly looks great. It's just tough to see. Obviously, we are we have that kind of soft spot for Philip Thomas, Mississauga boy, and we're kind of thinking about where he looks at in this lineup going into free agency this summer. But on a positive note, Nashville's been amazing this season.
Yeah, that's something where like no one loves to talk about a team where they're highlighted by Ryan O'Reilly and guys who aren't superstars. But guess what? They get the job done, and Forsberg's been amazing. I think he said he had 8 shots on goal tonight, which is just one little
Cool.
stat to kind of consider. But like so many players under the radar. A funny stat I saw, which I think our viewers will kind of laugh at, but Yakov Trenin got traded to Colorado at the deadline from Nashville, and he still hasn't lost a game in like regulation or something.
Hmm.
And I think it's like a 23 game win streak or something. And although he's doing great with this record, it's like Nashville's kept up that pace too, where they've been unreal. And it's just like you don't realize how hot teams can get for that long. Like that's ridiculous to me. So
I mean, they're getting hot at the right time, and if they could keep it up, they could definitely do some damage in the playoffs. And that's what scares me for a lot of teams where you might be good all season, a team like Vancouver, a team like Winnipeg, a team like Edmonton, and then when it comes to the playoffs, you almost kind of hit a brick wall. Could it be you're tired? Could it be the travel? Could it be, facing a new team 4 times in a row? It's a little bit of a difference. So Nashville, they're definitely getting hot at the right time. And I don't know if I want to call them my dark horse for the playoffs, but I mean, the way they're playing right now, it's hard not to say so.
yeah, honestly, it'd be nice to see a team like that in the playoffs. The last like memory I have from Nashville being in the playoffs was when Arvidsson was on the team, and I think they only made it maybe 1 or 2 years when he was on the team, but kind of a that similar era when they had like Grimaldi, Arvidsson, maybe Duchesne era, but they've been through a lot, and I think it would mean a lot to have Trotz have a little more success too, because he obviously has a big name, and we've talked before about how coaching is just so crucial, not just for the Predators, but teams like our Bruins too, and how good they are, right?
I mean, just in general, it could definitely make the difference. And everyone keeps talking about the U2 concert, and it seems like that is the difference that's kind of turned this season around for Nashville.
100%. Yeah. One player I want to highlight who it was like 6 o'clock and I think you walked in my room and you said Trevor Zegras is back tonight. And I had the biggest smile on my face. I'm just so happy to see that he's healthy, but seems like he didn't really do anything tonight. He's back. And I don't know why I'm so excited. I don't know if you're excited as well, but I think there's just so much to say about a team that's struggling like the Ducks, and how a little bit of a flash in your last 15 games could kind of turn around your season next year.
Well, it can make all the difference too. Even for Zegras, his name's been borderline slandered all season. It's been tough. With the injury, even when he was playing, he didn't look great. He didn't look like that superstar that came into the league almost 2 years ago and really made a splash. Had a slow start, missing training camp, contract negotiations. So all around, you can call this season for sure a failure for Zegras.
Yeah,
I'm interested to see how these last 15 games end up for him. I don't see him making a massive splash, but at the end of the day, his back's not against the wall here in these last couple games. I don't think a lot of people expect much of him, and he could kind of just go out there freely. They're not in the hunt for a playoff spot. They're not really looking to trade him at the deadline at the moment. We'll see what that looks like when it comes to the NHL draft in the offseason. But if you're Trevor Zegras, you just got to be happy that you're back and ready to play hockey.
exactly. I will call him in front of any viewer. I'll say that he's probably the best creator on that team and the best playmaker. So I'm excited to see what he can do. And if I'm sitting down to watch a Ducks game for 60 minutes, I want Zegers out there. I'll be completely honest with you.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
Of course. And now I think we'll move on to the Leafs, even though we always cover them. But quickly, when we talk about the Leafs losing to the Devils, what you haven't really told me about any concerns you've had with the Leafs, but do you do you not see like a gap with like in the Leafs lineup when you compare them to like all these teams that are looking really good up front?
I mean, I want to kind of touch on their decor right now, and then we could talk about up front. But I mentioned it when we were watching the game tonight. I think that tonight's lineup could was honestly one of the worst that I've ever seen put out. Like when you're looking at that first line, Jake McCabe and Timothy Liljegren leading your decor, obviously not the best defenseman in the world to be, your number ones. Second or third line pair, you know what? I don't mind it in the playoffs, but when you're missing Morgan Riley, you're missing some of these key pieces on D. Like we had Benoit, Timmins, Labushkin, Brody also. Like I don't even think decor like that could even sniff the second round of the NHL playoffs. So that's something for me that I'm, you know, a little bit skeptical of if I were a Leafs fan. But up front, I'm not too worried. I've kind of liked what they have to offer. I don't know if you differed in your opinion.
It's not that I differ. I just think that like their success doesn't look the same as any other team. I'm seeing it look a lot like the Edmonton Oilers right now, and I hate to bring up all these Canadian teams, but um, it's almost like we're seeing like the just like feeding to Matthews, feeding to Nylander. It's like if those two guys aren't going, then like you're having a serious problem. Like we saw those two were going tonight and they still lost. Like what's gonna happen when Matthews isn't scoring 3 goals every 4 games? Like he's on a ridiculous pace still, and it's like I the team aspect's not there, and I'm generally worried for him. I probably said this last pod too, but they're not close to the top teams in the East, and they're not going to touch a West team if they can't get out of the first, second round.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, especially with Marner missing right now too. Like you said, it's not too much of a team aspect. The only time where I have seen that is when they played Edmonton, and it really looked like they brought that aggression and grit to the lineup. And I think that's the only way the Leafs are going to win is if they could surprise a couple teams. And I know that's been a topic of discussion for what 7, 8 years now that has to change. But I think this is the lineup that has the opportunity to do it. The question is, are they going to?
Yeah, and I will respect what you were saying about the decor being their problem because again, I understand it's not up front. I really like the way guys like Robertson have been playing recently. I know he hasn't been contributing too much. He got a goal the other night, and then Nyes is looking decent. No one looks brutal, but again, it's you gotta look at your D and your goalies. I mean, that's still such a question, like literally a huge question mark when you say, okay, Wall played a decent game. Sammy's hurt. Do you play Jones? Do you keep Wall going? Like, so I guess I'll that'll end our Leafs talk. But I'm not impressed, and I'm not looking forward to their whoever they face in the first round.
Yeah, no, I think they're in a world of pain. I don't know who that's going to be. There's still lots of games to be played. Something I wanted to bring up though, and kind of wrap up our pod was something I noticed on Twitter today. You haven't seen the video, so I'll just kind of take it from here and I'll send it to you after that you could take a look because I think it was a 3 to 4 minute video, something like that.
Yeah.
So essentially, it was an NHL reporter that came out with a video on Twitter and said, if I were to paraphrase pretty much and summarize that, Zach Hyman, his success has stemmed from his family's money and the success of, the parents, which although his main point was that, yeah, sure, Zach Hyman is a 50 goal scorer, but he he only had this opportunity to be an NHL player because his parents had a ton of money. And you know what? When I was listening to that, and I'll let you listen, obviously your reaction is based off pretty much just what I'm saying. But if you look at any kid that has played any hockey at any level, obviously it's expensive and just giving a kid an opportunity like that, is great for parents. It's expensive, it costs money, but this guy was just bashing Hyman and his parents for no reason. Like it just seemed like he had some sort of ill intent against Hyman. I don't know what it was, like a vendetta, and all of hockey Twitter just pretty much abolish the idea that he was saying that. I saw Elliot Friedman tweeting about it. I saw Paul Bizinet, Ryan Whitney, all these people just absolutely clowning this guy that made the video. The video has 4.2 million views on Twitter, which is insane, and honestly, probably what he was exactly looking for. But yeah, I'm
Yeah,
looking forward to you listening to it, and then I'll grab your opinion. But for me, I was really disappointed in seeing that, and I definitely don't agree that Zach Hyman's a 50 goal scorer because his parents have a lot of money. Doesn't make sense to me.
yeah. Again, I wouldn't even have comments because that just sounds ridiculous. But I can't wait to watch that. So I'm glad you mentioned that to me.
No, for sure.
All right, beauty. Well, I think that wraps up episode 21 of our pod. We're looking to have some more guest appearances. We're hoping to post a little more on TikTok, Instagram, all of our platforms. So most importantly, reach out to us, listen to our podcasts. We'd love to collaborate, and thank you guys for listening.
Yep. Cheers.